I was just trying to make my morning coffee when my phone buzzed. No name, no hello. Just a single message and a video attachment from someone I hadn't thought about in years, Miss S. Callahan. Our old neighbor, the one who used to hand out homemade peppermint bark and had a weird obsession with flamingo lawn ornaments. Her message was chillingly simple. I'm so sorry, Quinn. I can't believe what I saw today. My stomach tightened. I tapped the video. It opened to the inside of a church. A familiar one. St. Jude's. My parents used to drag me there every Christmas Eve like it was some sort of sacred tradition. Smelled like incense and mothballs and always made my eyes itch. The camera zoomed in slowly. 2 figures at the podium. My parents? I stared at the screen like it had personally insulted me. My mom wore her favorite black lace dress and pearl earrings, the ones she only brought out for occasions. She was dabbing tears with a tissue like she was auditioning for an award. My dad stood stiff beside her, gripping a piece of paper with trembling hands. Behind them was a closed casket, and next to it, a giant framed photo of me. I stopped breathing. My dad's voice came through the speaker, calm, measured. She was always difficult, but we loved her. We tried. I felt like the floor dropped out beneath me. He was reading a eulogy for me. Though she left us too soon, we hope her soul finds peace now. What in the actual hell? I was alive, standing in my tiny apartment, holding a half-empty mug of coffee and watching my parents mourn my death like I was a tragic headline. I scrubbed back through the timeline, watched it again. Same expressions. Same carefully curated grief. They didn't flinch, didn't stumble. This wasn't shock. This was scripted. I braced myself on the counter, my hands trembling uncontrollably. I hadn't spoken to my parents in over 3 years. Not since they disowned me like I was a bad investment. But now this? A full-blown funeral? Fake tears? An obituary? I hit replay. My mom talked about my terrible accident. My dad mentioned how I'd spent my last years in isolation. Except none of that was true. There was no accident. I hadn't gone missing. I wasn't in hiding. I was working a night shift at a coffee shop halfway across the world, living paycheck to paycheck, staying out of sight, but still very much alive. So why the hell were they doing this? The video ended with a slow pan of the church. Familiar faces, extended relatives, old family friends. Even my childhood piano teacher, Miss S. Loring, who used to smell like lavender and frustration. They were all there, all dressed in black, all grieving like I'd been buried 6 feet under. But no one had ever called, texted, checked in, not one. That's when it hit me. They didn't just erase me. They buried me, alive. It hadn't always been this way. There was a time when I thought family meant something, loyalty, safety, home. That illusion shattered on a cold Wednesday morning 3 years ago, the day I got blamed for something I didn't do. The family business was bleeding money. My parents were panicking. And when the accountant flagged a massive withdrawal, nearly $80,000 gone, guess who got tossed under the bus? Not Rory. No, not my perfect, golden, can do no wrong little sister. It was me. Rory, who wore designer heels and carried handbags that cost more than my rent. Rory, who had a taste for expensive wine and worse boyfriends. She took the money. I knew it. Hell, deep down, I think my parents did too. But they needed a scapegoat, and I was convenient. I still remember the look in my mother's eyes when she said it. Cold. Final. Better to have one ruined daughter than 2. And my father? He couldn't even look at me when he whispered, "You've embarrassed us. You're not welcome here anymore." The next morning, I was gone. No money, no forwarding address, just silence. I called, blocked. I emailed, ignored. I even mailed a letter. Never got a reply. One by one, the doors I'd always believed would stay open slammed shut. Family friends disappeared. Cousins stopped returning texts. I became a ghost. And eventually, I started living like one. I moved abroad, picked a city where no one knew my name, changed my number, picked up a job at a cafe and started rebuilding myself from the ground up. Quiet, invisible, unremarkable. But I still held on to hope. Hope that anyone would reach out. That maybe, just maybe, one day my mom would pick up the phone. That my dad would send a card. That Rory would confess. Spoiler alert, That day never came. Instead, something worse did. About a year ago, I tried recovering my old email account. The system rejected me. Account deactivated due to confirmed report of user deceased. Deceased, legally died digitally, officially. I wasn't just disowned anymore, I'd been erased. That night, I didn't sleep. I just sat there, watching that damn funeral video over and over, like it held some secret I couldn't see. The fake sobs, the flowers, the lies. Something wasn't right, so I did what I do best. I started digging. First, I called my Aunt Gwen, my mom's older sister. We hadn't spoken in forever, but she used to slip me candy under the dinner table during Thanksgiving when my mom said dessert was earned. She picked up on the second ring. Hello? Aunt Gwen, it's Quinn. Click. She hung up. I called again, blocked. Next, I tried my cousins. One sent me a thumbs up emoji and then ghosted. Another asked if it was a prank, but then finally someone responded. My youngest cousin, Lucas, the one who used to beg me to teach him guitar. His reply was, "Cautious, Quinn? Are you actually alive?" I sent a selfie. Very much alive. Tell me, what did they say happened to me? The typing dots blinked. Then came the answer that broke me. They said you died in a car crash overseas. That there wasn't a body. Closed casket. Cremated. Some international delay, I think? I dropped my phone. There had never been a car crash. I'd never even owned a car abroad. They hadn't just lied. They'd forged a whole death certificate. And that was just the beginning. After Lucas told me about the car crash lie, I didn't just feel angry, I felt hollow. A crash overseas. Cremation. Closed casket. The whole thing sounded like a bad script. And yet, people believed it. They believed I died alone, in some foreign hospital, my body too broken to bring home. No one questioned the lack of details. No one wondered why I never said goodbye. Because it was easier, wasn't it, to believe the lie than face the truth. That's when I knew this wasn't grief. It was a cover-up. So I got to work. First, I pulled out every document I'd kept tucked away in a busted shoebox under my bed. Passport stamps, rental contracts, tax filings, copies of my visa renewals, even receipts from the tiny grocery store that sold instant noodles and off-brand chocolate bars. I practically lived on. Then I logged into the National Public Records database. It took 5 tries and a coffee I didn't remember making. There it was, my death certificate. Quinn Ellery Voss. Date of death, August 14th. Cause, vehicular trauma. Status, deceased. Stamped, filed. Accepted by the government. They killed me with a lie and sealed it with a signature. My breath got caught somewhere between a laugh and a scream. They didn't just want me gone. They wanted me gone, forgotten, legally erased. Like I'd never existed at all. It made sense in a messed up, twisted kind of way. If I was officially dead, I couldn't fight back, couldn't ask questions, couldn't claim what was mine, so I looked deeper. And that's when I remembered something. My grandfather's trust. When I was 16, he'd told me over dinner grilled salmon and lemon potatoes. I remember it clearly that he'd set aside a fund for me. College, travel, whatever life brings, he'd said, handing me a wrinkled envelope. Inside was a letter with account numbers. The ink barely legible. I'd filed it away, thinking I'd use it someday. Well, someday had arrived. I searched the fund. 6 months after my death, everything was transferred. Not frozen, not questioned. Transferred. To Rory. I stared at the transaction record, my knuckles whitening around the edge of my desk. It wasn't about grief. It was about greed. She got the money, the condo, the family business share, everything. My parents signed off on it, probably smiled while they did. The same people who told me I was a disappointment. The same ones who said I was unstable, who blamed me for every fracture in our family, handed my life over to the one who actually shattered it. And Rory, she didn't mourn me. She cashed me in like a scratch-off ticket. I needed more proof. I wasn't going to just scream into the void and hope someone listened. So I turned to the one thing Rory never could resist: attention. She'd gone private on social media for a while, probably to play the grieving sister. But recently she went public again. Engagement pics, champagne brunches, sunset boat parties. The whole influencer light package. And buried in the middle of all that sparkle and spray tan was a wedding album, white roses, candlelight, fairy lights strung between trees. It looked like a Pinterest fever dream. And in photo after photo, there they were, my parents, smiling like they hadn't faked a funeral 6 months earlier, laughing like they hadn't buried their eldest daughter, toasting the bride, Rory, dressed in white and dripping in gold. No mention of me, not even a nod. But in one picture, just one, I found it. A toast. The groom, arm around Rory, smiling like he'd just won the lottery. And beside him, my father, raising his glass. The caption underneath, "To the one daughter who always made us proud." That was the moment something inside me cracked open. Not broken, not hurt, not sad. Cold, dead cold. They hadn't just replaced me. They celebrated it. The next day, I walked into a law office with a folder thick enough to need staples on both ends. The attorney, a sharp-looking guy named Nash, barely blinked when I said the words, "I want to challenge my death." To his credit, he didn't laugh. He leaned forward, curious. "You're saying you're legally dead?" I slid the fake certificate across the desk. "Not just legally. Paperwork, digital records, financial institutions, all of it." He read it. Then the rest. His eyes widened slightly. This is fraud. This is a federal offense. I know." My voice didn't waver. "And I want to reverse it. Every bit." He looked at me like I was a miracle or a time bomb. "All right. First, we file to revoke the declaration of death. That's the keystone. Once that's done, we go after the estate fraud, the trust misappropriation, and any other assets transferred under false pretenses." "Good," I said, "because they're throwing me a memorial this Sunday." His head shot up. "What?" I nodded. Apparently, fake funerals weren't enough. They needed a final performance. St. Jude's, 3 p.m. Nash blinked. "Are you going?" I met his gaze. "I'm going to give them something to remember." That night, I stood by the window of my apartment. The city lights flickered below like static. The folder with my documents sat on the coffee table, glowing under the lamplight. They wanted me erased, forgotten, dead, but I was still here, and now I had everything I needed. Let them gather in their black clothes, clutching tissues and murmuring prayers. Let them cry over the daughter they threw away. Because this time, the ghost was walking through the front door. Sunday came like a storm front. It had been raining all night, soft, misty sheets of water slicking the pavement, muffling the city. I woke up before sunrise, not because of nerves, but because my body didn't know how to rest anymore. I'd rehearsed this moment in my head for days, but nothing could prepare me for seeing them again. All of them. St. Jude's loomed in my memory like a bad dream. Stained glass windows, polished pews, that strange smell of candles and cold stone. I knew the place, knew the rhythm of its old wooden floorboards, the way the doors creaked when they opened too wide. At 2:45, I was already across the street. Black coat, sunglasses, hair pinned back. I looked like I belonged, like someone mourning a stranger. The church parking lot was overflowing. SUVs, sedans, luxury cars that screamed, "Look how well we're doing," despite the tragedy. People poured in, dressed in somber shades, hugging each other like grief was something fashionable. I recognized too many faces. Old neighbors, former co-workers of my father's, my second cousin who once braided my hair at a barbecue. They all walked into that church to say goodbye to someone they thought was dead. Not one of them knew the person they came to mourn was standing 50 feet away, alive and breathing. I waited until the last person slipped inside. Then I crossed the street. Inside, the air was thick with quiet sobs and whispers. An organ played something slow and sad. My face stared back at me from a framed photo next to the altar, the same one they used on the obituary. I was smiling in it real, unguarded. A smile they didn't deserve to remember. My father stood at the front, voice solemn, hands folded over the pulpit like a pastor. "Quinn struggled in life," he said, "but she was loved, and we always hoped she'd come back to us." Lies wrapped in sympathy. My mother sat front row, lace handkerchief pressed to her lips like a dam holding back perfect tears. She looked like she'd stepped straight out of a Gothic novel, black dress, red eyes, silver brooch in the shape of a dove. Pure performance. Rory sat beside her, dressed like she hadn't stolen everything that once belonged to me. Hands folded, eyes lowered, the picture of sisterly grief. I stepped inside just as the priest said, "Let us take a moment of silence to remember Quinn." Perfect timing. The doors groaned open, the sound echoing through the silence like a thunderclap. Heads turned. A few gasped. Someone dropped a hymnal. Then, for a few seconds, the world just stopped. I walked down the center aisle slowly, deliberately. Every step echoing off the marble like a drumbeat. People leaned in, craning their necks to see. A woman near the back whispered, "Is that?" A child pointed. "Mom, that's her. That's the dead girl." I took off my sunglasses. My mother's face turned white, lips trembling. Her body jerked once before she collapsed in a dramatic faint. Someone caught her just before she hit the floor. Not a sound from Rory, just wide eyes and locked jaw. Her hand clutched the edge of the pew so tightly, I thought the wood might crack. My father? He didn't even blink. Just stared at me like I'd crawled out of the dirt. The priest stepped back, stuttering. What is this?" I didn't answer him. I walked to the front, took my place by the casket, and looked out at the sea of faces. Then I turned. "Nice of you all to come." You could hear a pin drop. I cleared my throat, pulled a folder from my coat, and laid it on the pulpit. "Some of you may be confused. After all, you came here to mourn me. Quinn Voss, the daughter, the sister, the troubled girl who apparently died overseas in a tragic car accident." I paused. "Let's clear that up. I'm not dead, never was. And everything you've been told? A lie." Murmurs broke out like wildfire. A few people stood. Others looked at each other, unsure if this was some kind of twisted joke. I opened the folder, flipped through the documents like I was reading a grocery list. Passport stamps, visa renewals, work contracts, rental agreements, tax forms, flight records. I was alive the entire time, and they knew it. I pointed to my father. He signed off on the paperwork. All eyes turned to him. He didn't move, didn't speak, but the muscles in his jaw flexed. I turned to Rory. She didn't blink. She looked trapped, like a deer in headlights, and I was the damn semi-truck. She got the trust fund, the condo, everything meant for me. 6 months after my death, she filed the transfer, beneficiary of a conveniently timed tragedy. Gasps. Actual gasps. Someone started filming. Good. Let the internet have it. Let them rewind and rewatch and dissect every second. My voice didn't rise. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. They didn't lose a daughter. They threw one away. And when that wasn't enough, they buried me alive. For money. For convenience. For their own goddamn peace of mind. I turned back to my photo. That smiling younger version of me. Still hopeful. Still naive. You mourned a lie. But I'm here now. And I'm not going anywhere. Then I did what no one expected. I closed the folder, picked it up, and walked out. No mic drop. No final monologue. Just silence. Behind me, the church burst into chaos. Outside, the air was crisp and raw. The rain had stopped, but the clouds still lingered like they were waiting for the punchline. I took a deep breath. It tasted like freedom. But this wasn't the end. No, this was just the scene change. Because the real reckoning, that hadn't even started. The next morning, the video hit social media. I hadn't posted it. Someone else had. Probably one of the dozens of people who thought they were attending a quiet memorial and ended up watching a resurrection. By noon, the clip had gone viral. The title? Dead Woman Walks into Her Own Funeral. Subtext: Family pretends she's gone to steal her inheritance. She comes back with receipts. Thousands of comments. Tens of thousands of views. Most people thought it was fake. I don't blame them. If I hadn't lived it, I wouldn't believe it either. My phone didn't stop buzzing for hours. Messages from unknown numbers. People asking if I was okay. Others just sent fire emojis and clapping hands. A few called me Queen of Revenge, which made me laugh harder than I had in years. But tucked between all the chaos were the ones that mattered. Lucas, you didn't just come back. You set the whole damn house on fire. And Nash, my attorney, we need to move quickly. The story's out. Pressure helps. Use it. So we did. He filed an emergency motion to revoke the declaration of death. Attached everything my proof, The video and the statement I'd written at 3 in the morning, fingers shaking, but heart steady. It read like a manifesto or a confession, but it was just the truth. That's all it had ever been. Meanwhile, the fallout began. News crews circled my old neighborhood like buzzards. St. Jude's declined to comment. My mother reportedly refused to leave the house. My father gave a brief statement to a local paper, claiming it was all a misunderstanding born out of grief. Sure, because filing fraudulent documents and cashing in on a trust fund is just how some people mourn. But Rory, she went silent, which told me everything. No denial, no fake tears, just silence. Nash and I filed 2 more motions, one for the wrongful transfer of assets, the other to open an investigation into estate fraud. We weren't just coming back from the dead. We were setting the record straight, and this time it was legal. But there was still one thing I didn't understand. Why go that far? Why fake an entire death? Why risk everything? Sure, Rory wanted the money. And yeah, my parents wanted peace, maybe status, maybe to clean the stain of me off their perfect little lives. But something deeper had to be hiding underneath. People don't build a lie that big unless they're scared of the truth. So I kept digging, and that's when I found the property deed. An old lake house. Not on any of the usual family documents. Registered under a shell company, created 6 months before my accident. The kicker? The trust fund didn't just go to Rory. It went through Rory, straight into a joint account with a man named Clayton Rhodes. I didn't recognize the name at first, but after a little digging, I did. Clayton was Rory's fiance before the one she married. Older, wealthy, discreet, very married at the time. According to the internet, Clayton and his wife went through a bitter, expensive divorce right after Rory walked out of his life with a chunk of change. And the shell company? It was created by his firm. That's when it clicked. This wasn't just about greed. It was about blackmail. Rory didn't just steal from me. She was involved in something bigger: money laundering, hush accounts, maybe worse. And faking my death? It was a clean way to scrub the trail. She needed access to funds without questions. I was the only thing in the way. So she erased me. Problem solved. But here's the thing about ghosts: we haunt. And now I had leverage. I called Nash and sent everything: account details, property files, timelines. He whistled low when he saw it. If this is accurate, we're not just talking fraud anymore. This crosses into criminal conspiracy, possibly even money laundering. Then let's push it, I said. Let's make them sweat. He agreed. We forwarded the documents to the investigator handling my case. We also submitted an anonymous tip to the Financial Crimes Division, with Clayton's name front and center. If Rory thought she was safe, she'd just stepped into her own trap. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. I spent them holed up in my apartment, fielding interview requests I didn't take, scrolling through headlines I didn't ask for. Everyone had a theory. Some thought I was part of it. Others treated me like a folk hero. A few dug up old photos and started trying to analyze my trauma like I was a case study. But the truth was simpler than all of that. I had been thrown away, replaced, forgotten. And now I was writing my own story. Then, on Thursday afternoon, Nash called. They responded. My breath hitched, and, through a lawyer, a very expensive one, they're claiming mental duress, grief, that the paperwork was an accident, that Rory misunderstood the legal process. I let out a short laugh. So now she's stupid, not evil? Basically, he said. But here's the thing: they offered a settlement. That made me pause. They want this to go away? Desperately. They're offering full restitution of the trust, a public statement acknowledging the confusion, and they want you to sign an NDA. No. His voice was quiet. You sure? It's a lot of money, Quinn. I don't want hush money. I want the truth. He was silent for a beat. Then, good. That's the right call. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice. That night, I went to the lake house. I needed to see it for myself. It was empty, windows dark, gate locked, but I could feel it like the walls were still echoing with secrets. I stood at the edge of the driveway, wind cutting through my coat, staring up at the house that had been bought with my stolen life. I didn't feel angry. Not anymore. I felt ready. They thought I'd take the deal, that I'd sign their NDA, take the money, disappear quietly again. But I wasn't the same girl who walked away 3 years ago with a duffel bag and a bruised soul. No, that girl was gone. This version of me, she had evidence, purpose, fire, and I wasn't going anywhere. The morning after I rejected their offer, the media kicked it up a notch. A few smaller outlets ran with the story first phrases like fake funeral fraud and daughter declared dead, while alive abroad kept popping up. Then it hit a national morning show. They ran a split screen. On one side, the viral video of me walking into my own memorial, calm as a storm on the rise. On the other, my family's estate records, leaked documents, and blurry photos of Rory on a yacht she definitely couldn't afford with her marketing salary. The headline read, "The girl they buried, but she came back with receipts." Social media devoured it. And for the first time in years, I wasn't invisible. Nash called that afternoon. "Things are moving fast," he said. The fraud unit picked up the financial threads. "That shell company? They traced it back. Clayton's firm is under review. Rory's accounts are frozen pending investigation." I stared at my laptop, half shocked. "That's real?" "Oh, it's very real," he said. "And there's more. They're issuing subpoenas next week. You're on the list as a primary witness." But that's not the part that got my attention. I raised an eyebrow. "What is?" They found a flagged wire transfer. 25 grand moved out of the trust fund 5 days before your accident. "Guess where it went?" "Don't say it," I whispered. "Clayton." And his name's also showing up in offshore accounts tied to property holdings across the state. I leaned back, the pieces clicking together so cleanly it almost made me dizzy. This wasn't just betrayal, it was organized. And I had walked right into the middle of it. That night, I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line was simple, please. The message? Just one line. "Can we talk before this gets worse?" Rory, I stared at the screen for a long time. There was a time I would have dropped everything for that message. She used to be my best friend, not just my sister. We shared secrets, snuck candy into the movies, covered for each other when things went sideways. But that version of her, the girl I once trusted, died long before they buried me. Still, I didn't delete the message. Not yet. 3 days later, I stepped into the courtroom for the first hearing. It wasn't the trial yet, just the start of the process to undo the legal death and reinstate my identity. Nash walked beside me, calm and focused. I had my documents in hand, pressed into a neat folder like armor. Inside that courtroom, I wasn't just fighting to be seen, I was proving I had always been here. The judge was middle-aged, sharp-eyed, and clearly annoyed that her Friday morning was now headline news. But she listened, to Nash, to the timeline, to my statement. I stood up and told my story, the same one I'd lived in silence for 3 years. I watched her face shift, not shocked, not even angry, just sad. Like she knew how broken people could be when there was money on the line. Her ruling was clear. The declaration of death was revoked. My status? Officially alive. There was no applause, no drama, just the sound of a gavel echoing through the room, final and cold. And yet, it felt like a resurrection. Outside, cameras waited. I ignored them. But I didn't ignore the woman leaning against the pillar near the courthouse steps. Rory. She looked nothing like the sister I remembered. Tired, washed out, hair pulled back in a shaky bun, makeup barely holding. No designer coat, no pearls. Just a thick coat and eyes that looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. She stepped toward me. "Quinn," she said softly, "please, just listen." I didn't move. Not toward her. Not away. "I didn't mean for it to go that far," she said. "It was supposed to be temporary. Just until I figured things out." I blinked slowly. "You faked my death." She winced. I panicked. I needed the money. Clayton was threatening to ruin me if I didn't help him move it. He said if I gave him access to the trust through you, no one would question it if you were out of the picture. I stared at her, numb. "So you erased me." She shook her head too fast, like denial could rewrite history. "I didn't know they'd filed the death certificate. I thought they'd just say you were missing." "Same difference," I snapped. "You told the world I was gone. You told them I was dead. You looked people in the eyes and let them grieve me." Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't trust them anymore. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. I know it won't fix anything, she said. But this, it's everything. The account details, the paper trail, Clayton's backups. I copied them before he locked me out. I took the envelope hesitantly. This doesn't make us even, I said flatly. I know, she whispered, but it's the truth, and it's yours now. That night, I brought the files to Nash. He flipped through them like he'd struck gold. This changes things, he murmured. It ties everything together, your trust, the offshore transfers, Clayton's shell companies. It's enough for the state to build a criminal case. Will it protect her? I asked. He paused. She's cooperating now. That helps. But it doesn't erase what she did. Good. I wasn't asking for erasure. I was asking for consequences. As the legal machine started grinding into gear, I found myself breathing easier for the first time in years. Not because it was over, but because it wasn't just me anymore. The truth was no longer a whisper I held in the dark. It was roaring down corridors of power, and it was unstoppable. The courtroom was quiet, too quiet. Not the kind of quiet that feels calm, but the kind that's thick with weight. Like everyone's holding their breath, waiting for something to break. I stood just outside the chamber, folder in hand, pulse steady for the first time in weeks. This wasn't a hearing about whether I was alive. That part was already behind us. This was about what happened and who had to answer for it. Fraud, conspiracy, asset theft. My name was now tied to a case that had crossed into federal territory. And at the center, Rory, my parents, and Clayton Rhodes. The prosecution opened with a clear, brutal timeline. They showed the transfers, the shell companies, the forged documents. Then came the funeral video. Even the bailiff shifted in his seat as it played. There I was, walking into a church full of people mourning me. My father's face as he gave a speech about my troubled soul. My mother's faint. The quiet gasp when I said, I'm not dead, but I am here to correct the story. The video ended. The silence after was louder than anything I could have said. They called me to the stand next, and I told it all. The exile, the silence. The night I learned I'd been declared legally dead by the people who were supposed to love me most. I watched the jury carefully, how they listened, how they leaned forward when I spoke about waking up to find the world no longer believed I existed. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I just told the truth. And sometimes that's louder than rage. My parents sat at the defense table, stiff and pale. My mother couldn't even look at me. My father tried once, but his eyes dropped before they reached mine. They had filed sworn statements claiming grief, confusion, clerical error, that they thought I was missing, that they only did what they thought was best at the time. But the evidence didn't lie. There were signatures, emails, legal filings. Their story fell apart under the light of facts. Rory took the stand last. Not as a defendant, she had struck a deal with prosecutors, trading testimony for reduced charges. She'd brought receipts, records Clayton never thought anyone else had access to. She looked hollow, tired, but she didn't cry. Not this time. She told them how it started, how Clayton pressured her, how the trust fund was supposed to be a bridge out of a situation she couldn't escape, how erasing me became the cleanest solution to a very messy problem. I didn't just betray my sister, she said, voice cracking. I killed her on paper, for money. And just like that, the courtroom felt even smaller. The trial didn't drag on. Clayton was arrested during closing statements. Fraud, money laundering, racketeering. They caught him trying to move funds from another shell account the night before. Rookie mistake. My parents weren't criminally charged, but civil court was waiting. And the reputational damage was done. The estate was frozen. Their names dragged through headlines and hashtags. They were living ghosts now. I knew how that felt. A month after the trial ended, I visited my old neighborhood. Not to confront anyone, not to relive anything, just to see. The Callahan's house still had flamingo ornaments. The same maple tree still leaned a little to the left near the corner. Nothing looked different, but I was different. I wasn't there to ask for anything. I didn't need an apology. I had closure. Back in the city, I met Nash for coffee. He looked relieved, like a man who had just finished sprinting through fire and lived to tell the story. You know, he said, stirring sugar into his espresso, in all my years doing this, I've never seen a resurrection handled quite like yours." I laughed. "Most people don't come back from the dead with a legal case in one hand and a mic in the other." He smiled. "So what now?" That question had followed me like a shadow for months. Now, I had options. I'd been offered book deals, podcast interviews, a streaming docuseries even, but none of that felt like the right ending. This story wasn't for profit, it was for peace. So I wrote something else instead, a letter to myself, to the version of me who thought silence was safety, who thought disappearing would protect her, who let people decide her worth and walked away believing they were right. I wrote, "You didn't disappear, you survived, and now you're finally free." Freedom didn't look like revenge. It looked like waking up and not checking the headlines, like walking down the street without fear of being invisible, like planting new roots without looking back. I changed my name. Not legally, just spiritually. Quinn Voss would always be part of my story. But I wasn't that ghost anymore. I was someone new, alive, whole, unapologetically here. People say the dead can't speak. But I did. And when I did, the whole world listened. Story 2. She simply isn't mine. I never requested to raise a child for someone else. I never really connected with her. My mother's voice was that, calm, far away, as if she were discussing a clothing she had never liked or a neighbor's dog. When I heard her say it, I was 16, sitting by alone in the corridor. As I listened to a discussion that would alter my entire perspective on family, my knees were drawn to my chest. The phone line paused for a long moment. Then her voice, light and informal. Again, she will mature and go like everyone else. If I avoid being very involved, it will be simpler. I'm Vanessa, and I'm currently 31 years old. But that night was the last time I was someone's daughter. You never forget your 16th birthday, so the saying goes. I'd want to. From the cake I made myself, I can still smell the vanilla icing. I taped the streamers to the ceiling. As if to break the stillness, balloons were hanging to the walls. I kept on waiting. The invites had been sent by me. Just in case, I had even pleaded with my mother to remind others. She murmured and looked at me wearily. Don't have high expectations, all right? She didn't want me to be disappointed, but at the time, I believed she meant good. However, when 7 o'clock rolled around, and I understood that she wasn't attempting to shield me from disappointment since nobody had arrived, not even her. The letdown was her. I pretended that the vacant chairs were occupied as I sat at the table with a paper crown on my head. To make myself feel less alone, I giggled at stories I made up and whispered jokes into the air. And then I heard her say those words. She simply isn't mine. It didn't hurt. I was branded by it. On that night, I didn't weep. I refrained from screaming. I just observed my unfinished cake as the candles melted. I knew something most people never do, even at the age of 16. The person who is meant to love you without conditions doesn't always do so. 15 years have passed since that evening. I established a life away from that house and the lady who occupied it. I went to school, developed a job, and created something from the ashes she left behind. People now describe me as powerful, self-assured, and unflappable. The 16-year-old girl who is still waiting to be seen, however, is not visible to them. Up until this week, I believed I had permanently buried that aspect of myself. I received a text from a relative I hadn't spoken to in years. Have you heard that your mother is hosting a lavish celebration for her 60th birthday? Elegant location. Your sister is assisting with all of the planning. No invitation was sent. Naturally, there wasn't. However, something changed within me. Not sadness, not rage. Only a faint, unyielding glimmer of interest. Proceed. A hushed voice. Not to engage in combat. Not to plead. Not even worthy of pardon. Only to observe. Perhaps she changed. Perhaps this was her attempt to make things right, of accepting me back into a narrative that had previously written me out. Or perhaps it was really a new chapter in the same book. I'm not 16 this time, though, and I'm not going in with nothing. The celebration is 3 days away. I was at the base of the stairs that I hadn't ascended in more than 10 years. The home remained the same. The corners of the same light blue paint are peeling. The door's wind chime is the same. When I waited for someone, anybody, to remember that I existed, I used to watch that one swing. I wasn't begging here. I was not here to take anything back. I simply had hope. A little pathetic ember of it. In my palms, though, it still burned. I was holding a box with a plain blue ribbon wound around it and covered in cream paper. I had discovered a brooch at an antique store. Gentle, timeless. It was the same type my mother used to adore in storefronts but never purchase. I wanted to present it to her face to face. Simply wish them a happy birthday and go. Easy, tidy, respected. I went to knock on the porch. Nothing at first. Then she appeared when the door creaked open. My sister. Her face was instantly filled with contempt. It didn't change. Boredom. I was never able to distinguish between her and me. She rested her head on the frame. She had her arms folded, like if she were defending a castle. "Well," she began, glancing over me as if I were a piece of sticky welcome mat. "This is not what was intended." I refused to fall for the ruse. Simply held the present up a little, gave a little smile. "Mom, are you home?" She remained still. "Why?" A recognizable voice drifted in behind her composed voice before I could respond. Chilly. Empty. "I am," and then my mom showed there looking flawless, with ivory pearls around her neck, as usual. Like glass stretched too thin, her grin was fragile. She gave me the kind of look one might give a funeral attendee who remained too long. She answered, "I had no idea you were in town." Not friendly, not even interested, just the facts. I extended the present. "Your birthday was mentioned to me. This is just something I wanted to leave. Best wishes to you." She glanced at the package and then back at me. She tightened her grin. "You ought not to have shown up." I blinked. "It's only a modest present." "I'm not going to remain," she interrupted me. "Family is the focus of this weekend." The words hit my gut like ice. I remained still. I did not lower my hand. She inhaled. The following sentence was spoken as if it were a court closing statement, practiced and finished. "You're not welcome. Once you were a visitor to this residence. That's all." It was there. Like a warning sign, the boundary between them and me was charred into the earth. I turned to face my sister. She didn't recoil. Her mouth really twisted into a grin that bordered on a sneer. "Don't make a fool of yourself," she whispered quietly. "Simply leave." No shouting, no doors slamming, no big moment. Only rejection. Plated and served calmly, as if they had been waiting for me for years. Maybe to feel something, maybe to give them one more chance to change their mind. I stood there for a little while longer. However, nothing remained to sense. With deliberate slowness, the door closed. The wind increased. I felt the box's ribbon flutter on my wrist, and suddenly I was on my own once more, as if I were celebrating my 16th birthday, standing outside of a life that I was never permitted to participate in. However, I didn't weep this time. I grinned as I glanced around the home, and then at the present I was holding. It was because something sharp inside of me finally woke up, not because I was at peace or forgave. They still believed I was that girl, pleading for love. They lost sight of who I had become. I turned and made my final descent of those steps, and I decided right then and there, keep quiet. Final and clean. They must celebrate according to my wishes if they didn't want me at the party. I spent a lot of time sitting in my car. The ribbon fluttered as if it were attempting to break the stillness, and the present remained in my lap. I have no idea how much time I spent staring at that door, or how many times I mentally rehearsed her voice. "Once, you were a visitor to this residence. Not family, not a daughter. Only a short-term guest. As if I were a stray, someone neglected to come back. I felt like something inside of me broke, but not in the same way. This time, no tears were shed. Don't ask the universe to give you a reason. Don't fall into heartbreak. Nothing except silence. As if the quiet before a storm didn't simply blow in, it selects its own course. I inhaled deeply. I went to my glove box and unlocked it. My old phone, which I hadn't used in years, was inside. There's a reason I kept it. I seldom ever used my backup email account, but it had access to it. I spotted that as soon as I logged in. The correspondence from the lawyer for my late father. Details of the subject family trust must be signed. I had disregarded it at the time. They had nothing to offer me, not even cash. I want seclusion and quiet. Now, however, I read it thoroughly now. My dad, Is it biological? I will never know. Had established my mother's retirement trust, an important one. However, there was a requirement. Only with both daughters' consent could it be released. My consent, my name, and my signature. Then all of a sudden, things changed. They could act as though I never existed. They had the power to twist tails, slam doors, and remove pictures. But without me, they couldn't gain that trust. More than their pride, I had something they needed, and they didn't know. A mixture of a warning and a smile formed on my lips. Perhaps it was time to remind them of who they were dealing with, if they were going to act as though I didn't belong. I tapped the screen, and the party planner's contact information appeared. Nice tone, polite voice, slightly frazzled. I inquired about the progress of the planning. Yes, we had to reduce the scope a little. Tighter than anticipated budgets. Your sister brought up lowering the floral budget and eliminating one of the live musicians. I grinned. What if there was no problem with money? A pause occurred. I apologize. I want to support the event as a sponsor. Calmly, anonymously, I said. It seemed as if I could hear the planner's jaw drop. Oh well, that's generous. But may I ask why? I have my reasons, I replied. One condition. I want control over the tribute video. Just that. Another pause then. I don't see an issue with it. Of course she didn't. Because in their universe, I was invisible, powerless. Just a ghost outside the family picture. Now, however, I was the one paying for their fairy tale. And I was going to write the final chapter. I looked down at the present on my lap. It wasn't mine to give anymore. I carefully placed the package on the curb after rolling down the window. The paper was taken by the wind after the ribbon. It destroyed the streetlight, and I saw it happen. Like me, they lack direction and are quickly forgotten. So far, the party night showed up like a well-practiced deception. The location was stunning and far more sophisticated than the invites had suggested. Champagne, silk, and floor-length draperies glistened beneath golden lights. Each table was adorned with fresh orchids. In the background, a quartet of strings performed. They have a rich, mellow tone. The improvement was not questioned by anyone. They simply thought that my mother had spent every penny possible, that the perfectionist lady had finally treated herself to the party she believed she had always earned. She moved about the room like a queen at court, grinning, giggling, and taking compliments with feigned humility and humble nods. "Did you do all of this?" she was asked. She gave a charming smile. "Well, I think that important occasions call for more work." The unidentified donor was never disclosed by her. The daughter she swore didn't belong was never given credit. Naturally, she didn't. It would be an admission that someone else was working behind the scenes if she acknowledged that she hadn't done it herself. Someone she want to forget. From the shadows, I observed, present but unseen. I came not to socialize. I wasn't here to cause trouble. I was here to make a point. I watched them all. The neighbors, the visitors, and the distant relatives. They're all dressed to impress, drinking champagne and clinking glasses. None of them realized what was about to happen, even though I paid for it. Verify your source. Before a lightning strike, tension hovered in the air like dampness. Simply put, they were unaware that the storm had already begun. The lights grew dimmer as the night wore on. The audience quieted down as the MC took the stage and began tapping his microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a wonderful treat in store before we start talking about cake and dancing. An homage to our esteemed guest. 60 glorious years of laughter, love, and life. A round of applause filled the ballroom. My mom used a napkin to dab at her eyes. Emotional already. The screen sprang into life. A gentle piano tune was performed. My mother's childhood pictures dominated the screen. White and black. Pictures from a simpler era. It was her first birthday, her graduation, the day of her wedding. Visitors drooled. In a proud whisper, my sister spoke to a friend. The pictures of her daughters, or rather, daughters, came next. On her first day at school, my sister. At her piano concert, my sister. My sister is displaying her letter of admittance to college. The shift follows. The music ceased. The screen was filled with a single image, hazy, unaltered. I was sitting by myself at a plastic table at the age of 7. No balloons, no cake, not a family. Me staring directly at the camera, grin with wide eyes. I felt uncertain, as though I was still awaiting someone's arrival. There was silence in the room. One more picture. Me once again, older this time, standing on the brink of a household, collectively. The picture ended. Hardly ever put my sister in my mother's arm. Every single time, I was 2 inches out of frame. There were more pictures, a pattern of erasure, neglect, and absence. The piano did not return, but the music did. It was cooler this time, very little, far away. A gentle song that made your throat clench. Then came the ultimate slide, white letters on a black screen. Happy 60th birthday, Mama. From the daughter you thought didn't deserve to be here. And the one who paid for all you're enjoying tonight. Gasps a chair scratched on the floor, someone whispered. Wait, what? Everyone looked at my mom. Her hands gripped her napkin as if it were a barrier as she froze. And I emerged from the darkness. Not to yell, not to confront, only to be observed. On my terms, at last. For this was more than a celebration. It was a reckoning. The room remained silent even after the TV turned blank. It became deeper, as if everyone had lost the ability to breathe. People gazed. A few looked at one another, uncertain whether to offer a heartfelt applause or an apology. At first, my mother remained still. Her lips opened, the mask shattered, and her hands slowly dropped off her face. Do you find this clever? Her voice trembled with anger as she hissed. Do you consider it a win to make fun of me in front of my friends? Her chair screeched across the floor as she quickly stood up. Sharp, enraged eyes are now on me. You've been an issue all along. Need attention at all times. Being second best is too much for you to bear. You acted like a child and threw a fit. She stepped forward. All right, say whatever you want. Don't act like this is about love, though. Isn't it all about the money? That is the reason you came. You're envious. You're resentful. You remain the pitiful outsider that you have always been. Some of the visitors let out a gasp. One man attempted to gently tug her arm back. She pulled away. I didn't recoil. I gave in to her tirade, allow her to untangle, in front of the people she had worked so hard to impress, thread by thread. And I reached into my clutch and tapped the screen of my phone when she eventually ran out of steam, and the room had completely fallen into agony. The speaker made a click. I couldn't get my voice across. Hers was clear but cracked. Timestamp was recorded. The release has not yet been signed by her. The voice of my sister came next. I believe I can bring her back to my mother, but not yet. Cold and low. Release will finally receive the funds if she signs the trust. For one day, just give her a sense of belonging. One day, all I need is that. Then there was quiet. It was audible. The recognition in her eyes at that moment. Words and traps of her own. The audience pivoted. A few retreated. Others merely gazed. The quartet of strings had ceased their performance. A server held a bottle of champagne in midair and froze. Once more, my mother opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Simply panic. I took a small step forward so that my voice could be heard. Just the truth, without rage or yelling. I wasn't invited to this celebration by you. I was used by you. I had something you needed. And you believe that I was still in such need that I would exchange my honor for scraps. I glanced around and looked into everyone's eyes. However, you were mistaken. She extended her hand for an answer, a return, anything. However, the harm had already been done. All I had done was press play, and she had revealed herself. It was the quietest the room had ever been. No laughter, no music. Just the sound of people holding their breath and their reputations falling apart. My mother appeared to still believe she could rewrite the story to her advantage as she stood motionless, her mouth open and her eyes wide. But everyone knew she was at her wit's end. As if she were the victim, she stepped toward me and whispered, "Now, don't do this to me." Similar to all those years of erasure, exclusion, and silence. As though I should forget them. Simply because it was she who felt exposed at last. I just studied her for a moment without moving. I then moved forward slowly and set the unopened gift box down at her feet. Still flawless and immaculate. Silently, I said, "Don't worry, you weren't harmed by me." I surveyed the space. When I arrived, the patron who had cheered her pitied me and murmured, "I made the celebration for you. You desired." I covered the cost of the band, the dress, the meal, and the flowers. You always wanted attention, and I gave it to you. I looked into her eyes once again. All I did was remind everyone who truly paid for it. And with that, I turned. I didn't need applause. I didn't need revenge. I only wanted the door to open this time. And this time, I was the one going out. The crowd parted like water. No one dared stop me. Because for the first time in my life, they finally knew who I was. Story 3, I am Lena Hart. And this is the tale of how my sister unknowingly promoted me after attempting to disgrace me in front of her boss. The sound of clinking wine glasses and familiar laughter filled the garden. This year's Hart family reunion took place at our parents' Connecticut house and was usually a full-fledged affair. Every table has freshly cut flowers, and there is an ice sculpture in the shape of Hart and Wallace Investments' corporate emblem. In the midst of it all, my twin sister Natalie was holding court, of course. At the company, Natalie had recently been elevated to the position of Vice President of Strategic Growth. The family's pride, the one who did it all correctly. Her distinctive voice drifted over the jazz band as I grabbed for a flute of champagne. "Oh, here is Lena, my twin sister." She called out to a group of well-dressed coworkers. One of them was a silver-haired man I knew from LinkedIn, James Wallace. She is now juggling a number of activities, including experimenting with businesses. My drink almost suffocated me. Natalie put her hand over my shoulder and drew me in. In her own peculiar way, she is bright. She was constantly thinking about creating applications or whatever it is that folks do these days. She gave a charming smile. In the most patronizing way imaginable, it was the type of smile that screams, "Bless her heart." The group gave a courteous laugh. Mr. Wallace nodded curtly at me. Well, meeting creative people is always beneficial. Natalie grinned as if she had just won something. Of course, we can find her something in the firm if it doesn't work out. Perhaps an assistant position. Everybody begins somewhere. I said nothing at all. I didn't have to. Because... What? What did Natalie not know? No one at this reunion was aware that my experimenting had led to my cybersecurity business being recently acquired for $48 million. The deal's ink hadn't yet dry. Ironically, Natalie was now in charge of Hart & Wallace's technology section, which my attorneys and I were still working on to complete the NDA-laden documentation. Yes, her team was ready to implement my program as the new security foundation for their company. She simply wasn't aware of it yet. I grinned as I took a taste of my champagne. Later, let her speak. With proudly heated cheeks, our mother sailed over. According to Natalie, her team has an entry-level position available. You might want to apply. You would benefit from having some structure once more. I made myself chuckle. Yes, structure. Her voice was gentle with fake pity as she said, "I know it's been hard for you, sweetheart, but having Natalie is a blessing. She is constantly watching out for you." I saw Natalie across the yard as she threw her head back in exercise and shook her hands. Laughter. Always on stage. Have to be the favorite all the time. Holding 2 glasses of red wine, Aunt Celia joined me close to the garden's edge. "She doesn't really know, does she? Tell me about who you are now," she requested. I blinked. "You are aware, please." She laughed. "You were the main speaker at the Rising Women in Tech conference last month, according to Forbes. When I saw your name, I almost passed out." This time, my laughter was sincere. "I understand," she continued, furrowing her brow. "I kept your parents in the dark. I assumed you had a motive. I waited until the proper time and nodded." "Well," Aunt Celia murmured, her eyes gleaming mischievously. "The board announcement next week might be that time." Gazing into my glass, I grinned. At that point, I received an email on my phone from Wallace, the IT director, and the Hart confirming that my system would be fully rolled out the next quarter. Natalie's greatest accomplishment as vice president, and she was still unaware that my name was on it, but she would shortly. I was not meant to view the letter I got the Monday after the reunion. It arrived in a big envelope that included a board-issued sensitive internal memo that was mistakenly addressed to me with the Hart and Wallace seal. The software CTO offered me was being formalized. To make sure the phrase was perfectly clear, I read it 3 times. Lena Hart is acknowledged by the board as the primary innovation behind the recently purchased cybersecurity system. With effect from Q3, We plan to extend the offer of Chief Technology Officer pending announcement. In startled stillness, I gazed at it. Not because the offer startled me, but because it validated my suspicions. But Natalie didn't know. Following her compelling pitch, my company conducted research, linked the product to me, and determined they needed more than simply my coding. They desired me. Natalie left me a message on my phone the same morning. According to HR, you must complete the necessary papers for the position of junior analyst. Remember to pack a blazer. I almost spilled my coffee. If it weren't so exactly on brand, it would be amusing. I got my laptop open and sent a brief email to the board to express my gratitude for the offer. I haven't yet pushed send. Before the reality struck, Natalie like a brick, I had to see how far she would go. That evening, Aunt Celia called. "Have you received it?" she inquired. "Don't be nice." "I understand," I said. "I have a CTO offer from them." She gave a sharp exhale. "I hope you're prepared then." "There is no applause for that title. War is a part of it," I grinned. Since we were 5 years old, my sister and I have been at odds. The days that followed went by in slow, surreal motion. I kept getting check-ins from Natalie, just making sure you completed the HR forms. I instructed them to expedite you. "CC me on everything, please, sister. Having you as my protege will look excellent." Protege. I was using the technology. Her whole company was turning around. I saved the texts each time she descended. Then Thursday arrived. At 10:07 a.m., I received the email announcing the company-wide announcement, sharp, on topic. Lena Hardy unlocked it to greet our new CTO, with words describing my accomplishments. The acquisition, my history, and my vision. My headshot gleamed back at me. My phone exploded. Not from Natalie, from journalists, partners, and board members. Mr. Wallace himself has one message. Looking forward to working together to shape H&W's future. However, Natalie. Radio quiet till 1041. Like a cyclone, she stormed into my flat. The cheeks turned red. "Do you mean me?" She let out a cry. "Knowing what was coming, you allowed me to show you out like a charity case." Calmly, the first stood. "It looks like you like being in the limelight. How come you didn't tell me?" "Why would I?" I inquired. "You expressed your opinion on my career rather clearly." Her voice broke. "However, you accepted my offer to work in my department. I didn't recoil. You now work in mine as well." She stopped talking. I displayed the board's memo. "I was their choice. I built something real, Nat, not because I'm your sister." She took a firm seat on my couch. "I will be ruined by this." For the first time in years, I didn't feel little when I looked at her. I didn't feel like the twin with the screw-up. I felt whole. "No," I said softly. "If you allow it, this might be the thing that saves you in the end." She didn't answer, but she also didn't leave abruptly. And it was progress for Natalie Hart. It had been years since Lena Hart had felt so lively. As she climbed to the 48th story of the Reeves Tech Tower, the elevator chimed quietly. Her hair was arranged into a neat, low bun, and she was wearing a stylish blue pantsuit. Lena had the appearance of the CEO she was growing into. Her name, however, was unknown here. Not quite yet. She was known to the public as Elena Gray, the mysterious cybersecurity prodigy who was just named Reeves Hart Holdings Chief Technology Officer. The board announcement, which was made privately just that morning, was the outcome of a recent high-profile merger, claimed an NDA-protected acquisition, and signed under her alias. All of this was planned. Furthermore, her older sister, VP of Strategic Growth, Natalie Hart, had failed to see the connection. Not last quarter when she presented a new security framework, not when she unwittingly supported Lena's proprietary system as the foundation for the business's technological advancement. Certainly not right now. Lena had seen it all from the shadows. Natalie's polished presentations, her speeches about innovation, and the pride with which she sold a system her sister built from a tiny apartment over 3 exhausting years as she got ready for a joint meeting with the incoming CTO, whom she had yet to meet. Lena had first thought about coming out right away, but a week before, over coffee, Dr. Irene had expressed it best. "Before she realizes it's you, let her talk about how brilliant you are. Empathize with her and let her feel proud." Lena waited, observed, and then got up. The skyline could be seen from the floor-to-ceiling windows of her new workplace. Minimalist, tidy, sharp. Similar to the facilities she had planned. CTO Elena Gray was written on a matte plaque on the entrance. Inside, dear Irene was already waiting, smiling smugly from her seat on the guest chair. Lena slipped out of her coat and said, "You're fashionably late for your own arrival. How does it feel too?" With sparkling eyes, Irene inquired. Lena paused, like entering a structure. "I now own a portion of the foundation, which I was never permitted to enter as a child." Her hand was extended by Dr. Irene. "Every brick was earned by you. And this is only the start." At 11 a.m., the staff orientation was planned. Sharp. Department heads filed into the meeting room as Lena observed through the one-way glass wall. Natalie was one of them. Today, she wore scarlet, self-assured, and strategic. Lena saw her sister's courtship style, which included much laughter and little gestures. It was well known, almost sentimental, until Natalie stated, "I hope this CTO isn't another tech bro with no social skills," leaning toward a coworker. Lena's eyebrow went up. "I suppose I'll have to let you down. Good morning." As Lena entered the meeting room, the room became quiet. Reeves' heart logo appeared on each screen. Behind her, the slide said, "Welcome, CTO Gray." With her laptop in hand, she approached the head of the table, pens poised, seats straightened, a gentle rustling. Slowly, Natalie turned. Not everyone recognized them right away. Confusion flickered, followed by astonishment, then a sharper object. Lena grinned. "Let me reintroduce myself before we start. My name is Lena Hart. You might not recognize me at all, or you could know me by a different name. However, I am now your Chief Technology Officer." Murmurs, gasps. Natalie stopped. "We recently licensed a product that some of you might also recall. Sentinel X is the security platform that excelled in every audit. I constructed that in my studio apartment using 3 maxed-out credit cards and used servers." She took it all in. At a family barbecue, some of you met me as the unemployed little sister. Natalie once offered to mentor me as a tech hobbyist. Lena turned and looked at her sister. "As it happens, I didn't require mentoring. I required a chance. Quiet. Not the awkward kind, though. The previous kind. Tectonic movements." The tension was finally released by Natalie's voice. "How come you didn't tell me? Would you have paid attention? Or would you and your father have laughed it off over dinner?" Natalie winced. "This has nothing to do with retaliation," Lena added. "It has to do with taking back space. We constantly encourage young women to have big dreams, but when they do, even their families occasionally question them. I therefore created something on my own terms and stopped waiting for approval." When she pressed the remote, the screen appeared with charts that decreased the chance of a breach, increased the efficiency of the infrastructure, and saved money. "I'm not gloating here. I am here to take the lead." The majority of the crew quietly left after the presentation. "Look down. I'm racing." Natalie remained. "All of that you built yourself." Lena gave a nod. 3 years. Evenings. Weekends. All of it. Natalie took a seat in a chair. "I referred to you as a sister, in between jobs. Did you? You're my boss now, too." Lena softened her smile. "Only if you remain." Stunned, Natalie looked up. "After everything, you'd want it. I want a productive team. And when you're not trying to outdo everyone, you're terrific at what you do. Perhaps it's time for us to shine, next to one another." In years, for the first time. There was no return for Natalie. Lena let out a breath as she just nodded. Leaving people behind was not the goal of the ascent. She wanted to raise herself and perhaps, just possibly, teach others how to do the same. There was a bustle of activity in the boardroom. Lena was standing outside the executive conference room at Hart Investments, which had glass doors. As she fiddled with the collar of her fitted jacket, her heels made a gentle reverberation against the marble floor. Unaware of the storm, her sister Natalie was sitting behind the door, poised and ready to enter. The CEO and founder, Gregory Hart, arose and spoke to the executive team. Through the commotion, his deep voice could be heard. For Hart Investments, a new chapter begins today. With our impending Reeves Tech acquisition, we are shaping our future, not only obtaining technology. Natalie, who was sat 2 places away from the head of the table, smiled confidently as she leaned forward. This merger had revolved around her. She was prepared to claim full credit for all she had done, including pitching the integration and advocating for the use of the enigmatic security platform that Reeves Tech had purchased. Gregory went on. And now to take the lead in our technical change, I'm pleased to present the combined company's new Chief Technology Officer. He turned to face the door. They opened the double doors. Lena took over. There was complete silence in the room. Natalie's smile stopped. Her face was devoid of color. Introducing Lena Rowe, Gregory grinned and said, "Creator of the platform we're integrating, Citadel Protocol, our new CTO has arrived." It was ruthless quiet. As though experiencing hallucinations, Natalie gazed at Lena. "What?" At last, she sounded thin as she coughed out. Lena gave a courteous grin. "Hi, everyone." A few executives gave a tentative applause, not knowing if they were seeing a business coup or an unexpected promotion. Natalie's chair scraped the floor as she jerked to her feet. She looked at Gregory and then at Lena and said, "You can't be serious. She isn't eligible for this. This firm is unknown to her." Lena's gaze was unwavering. "I know this company inside and out," she answered quietly. "For years, I've been observing it from the outside, and now I'm doing it from within. Many thanks." "What does that signify?" Natalie's voice rose as she asked. Gregory cleared his throat. "Maybe we should all sit down." He spoke aggressively. "Would you please show us your roadmap, Lena?" Lena approached the screen. She gave an accurate, thorough, and inspiring presentation. She discussed scalable infrastructure, AI integrations, and cybersecurity as she outlined a 24-month transformation plan. She confidently answered all of the board's questions. Natalie would never have been able to respond to even the most complex technical questions by herself. Natalie sat still. She remained silent until the board members started to whisper and use impressed tones, and the room erupted in applause. At last, Natalie lost her temper. "This is absurd." She gave a hiss. "You caught me off guard. My sister is you. You didn't even tell me either." Lena faced her. "You expressed your opinion of me clearly. The sister who works at several professions. Do you recall the case of the charity?" "It was a joke," Natalie fired back. "No." Lena spoke in a calm but piercing tone. "Whenever you got the chance, you reminded everyone that you were the victor and used it as a weapon in front of your coworkers and our family. And the failure was me." Natalie's face reddened. "What the heck? This is retaliation." Lena gave a headshake. "This is the truth. Additionally, you will need to make the decision to participate or not." Gregory moved forward with an inscrutable expression. "Let the two of you talk." After saying that, he turned to face Lena. "CTO Rowe, welcome on board." Everyone left the boardroom, leaving the sisters alone. Natalie's tone faltered. "Did you go behind my back?" "No," Lena said. "I proceeded without requiring your consent." Significant difference. "You have no idea how this place operates." Lena responded, "I know exactly how things work. Furthermore, I am aware that you would have destroyed my resume before even reading my name if I had shown up with it rather than a company you were in dire need of." Natalie stopped talking. Lena went on. "You can choose. We can work together to develop something better, or you can continue acting like you're above me and that this isn't happening." After scoffing, Natalie paused. "Do you really believe you can just outrank me?" Lena remarked. "I didn't come in to outrank you. I entered to take the lead. You remain the vice president. You still possess power. That power, however, now rests on your ability to share it." Natalie paced, the edges of her normally composed demeanor showing. "This. Everything is altered by this." "Yes," Lena replied. "Yes, it does." A long pause ensued. "Then, why didn't you tell me?" Natalie whispered. Lena gazed at her sister with a sadder expression rather than one of rage. "Since you've long since stopped listening." Natalie sank back in a seat. "I thought I was the only one who could carry the family name forward." "You were never alone," Lena said gently. "You just never looked beside you." For a moment, the two sat in silence, the air thick with all the years between them. The rivalry, the missed chances, the love buried under expectations. Lena stood. "I'll be at the Integration Summit next week. We'll be on stage together. You can choose what role you want to play when that spotlight hits." Natalie didn't answer. Her eyes were locked on the letterhead Lena had left behind on the table. The Reeves Tech acquisition terms. Lena's name signed in full. As Lena walked out of the room, she paused by the door and said, without turning around, "This isn't revenge, Natalie. It's restoration. You may either fight it or rise with it." Then she was gone, and for the first time in a long time, Natalie didn't know what to say. 6 months later, the Hart family reunion looked a bit different. Gone were the rows of white linen tables and elaborately posed family pictures. No live jazz trio hired by Natalie this time. No signature drink named after their father's legacy. Just a picnic-style gathering in the yard behind the home with mismatched seats, finger snacks, and a definite sense of something fresh. Sincerity. Lena came early, bearing a dish of baked lemon bars. She wore trousers and a linen shirt, hair pulled up casually the way she used to before tech conferences and boardrooms. Natalie was already there, barefoot on the grass, sleeves pulled up, battling with a recalcitrant folding table. Lena grinned. "You need a hand?" Startled, Natalie looked up. Then she let forth a genuine, unadulterated chuckle. "Just as long as you won't criticize me for losing a battle with inanimate objects." "It depends," Lena said. "Have you attempted to restart it?" For a long beat, they both laughed while Lena assisted her in setting the table. They simply stood side by side, observing the growing number of guests arriving in the backyard. It wasn't flawless. A couple of awkward greetings, a few distant relatives. I'm still unsure of how to behave around the family genius who was just discovered. However, it felt more genuine than anything they had done in a long time. Last to arrive was Gregory Hart. He walked a bit more slowly now, and Lena saw for the first time the fatigue behind his eyes, not just from age, but from decades of pressure, control, and the burden of a legacy he had too firmly established. He went up to Lena by himself. "Dad, you look good." Lena spoke quietly. Gregory gave a nod. "You do too." They stood clumsily. Gregory had always found it easier to discuss markets than feelings. "I read the transcript of your keynote." At last he spoke, the Singaporean one. Lena blinked. "Did you read that?" "I read them all now," he said. "I've been making progress." She was at a loss for words. No longer at war, Gregory turned to face his two daughters in the garden. "Lena, I was mistaken. I didn't simply undervalue you. I let you down." Her throat constricted. He went on. "I kept thinking success had to look a certain way. Organized, secure, predictable. That didn't match you. I thus erred in believing you didn't belong." Lena maintained her gaze steady as they swelled. "I had no desire to fight you. All I wanted was to be noticed." Gregory faced her. "Yes, you are. Not only as a surprise either. Achievement, as my daughter." He took a picture of her when she was 12 years old, one she hadn't seen in years, out of his jacket pocket, triumphantly standing next to a project called How Encryption Keeps Secrets. At a scientific fair, he said, "I didn't understand this. However, your grandma did. This one was framed by her. After she died, it was in her closet. The shot was taken by Lena. Her youthful face was beaming with happiness, clutching something she loved long before the world told her. It wasn't enough, even though the edges were delicate and the colors were a little faded. Natalie came up behind them. "Dad," her voice was hesitant as she said, "it won't ignite the grill." "I believe you frightened it," Gregory chuckled infrequently. "I'll show it who's in charge." Natalie turned to Lena as he left. Was he joking? Lena gave a nod. That was probably a joke. After letting out a sigh, Natalie gave Lena a Coke. "How is it to be a tech icon then?" Lena smiled and took the can. Chaotic, rewarding. In addition to launching a new program for first-generation female entrepreneurs, I have been mentoring a few young women entrepreneurs who, like me, build in quiet. "That's incredible," Natalie remarked earnestly. "HR has been speaking with me. Our recruitment strategy is being revised. Reduce the pursuit of pedigrees and increase atypical employment." For a while, they stood still and drank in silence. Without glancing at her, Natalie continued, "I owe you an apology for more than simply the reunion, for everything. For each time I attempted to make you smaller in order to feel larger." Lena waited for the words to sink in. "You always had a knack for taking up room. All I had to do was learn. I was permitted to pick mine up." Natalie raised her head. "Do you wish to instruct me in code writing?" Lena's eyebrow went up. "Are you serious?" "I don't guarantee that I'll be proficient at it." But I'd want to know what you built, Natalie remarked. Know it well, Lena grinned. Next. Yes. First, let's look at Python. Don't judge. When semicolons are forgotten, Natalie chuckled. Deal. Later, someone proposed taking a group shot as the sun began to set and string lights began to flicker across the yard. Lena was not afraid to stand close to the middle this time. With her arms slung carelessly over her shoulders, Natalie stood beside her. As the camera flashed, Gregory placed a gentle palm on each of their backs. Nobody was acting. Nobody was acting. Only a family. Present, but imperfect. When ridiculous postures were requested by the photographer, Lena's tongue protruded. She was imitated by Natalie. Gregory smiled crookedly, but lifted one eyebrow. Lena then strolled up to the lawn's edge and looked out over the hills that surrounded their childhood home. She was accompanied by Natalie. Have you ever wished we had arrived sooner? Always, Lena said. But perhaps in order to recreate it, we had to break everything. Natalie gave a nod. Do you ever believe we'll regress? Yes, we will. But now we know how to course correct, Lena stated. She gave her sister a glance. Nat, we are no longer competitors. We both co-designed the project. A beat went by in silence. Natalie grinned. Next, let's design the type of home that we would both want to live in. The laughing behind them drew them back, in the direction of family, in the direction of forgiveness, in the direction of something that felt like home for the first time in a long time.